Yeah.
So here we are, zoning and building 101. So, you know, the main question, what is zoning? Zoning divides a city into zones or districts. And what it regulates is the use of the land, what building types are acceptable on that land, the location of the building on the site, the height and orientation of the building. It also stipulates required landscapings, parking spaces, approves signs, and actually they're part of our software system now. They can actually write the sign permits right out of their office. And then on a larger scale, they do the oversight of subdivision layouts for larger scale developments. What zoning does not do, it doesn't do neighborhood or comprehensive planning. So they have the rules, and somebody else does the planning. It does not regulate streets, alleys, or sidewalk conditions, street lighting, property conditions, tall grass, litter, siding, roofing, noise issues, or the utilities. And we have different departments that do the legwork on those. The tall grass and stuff, that's, well, it used to be called code enforcement. I'm not sure exactly what it's called now, but and then the utilities, of course, we have the water department. You go for answers on those things through them, and engineering. So we went through an update in 2020, and this is kind of where I get gray here. I don't know exactly what she was going to talk about this, but I know Angela and Tim Corcoran worked extensively to try to simplify the zoning ordinance. So they really went through the whole thing and rewrote it, and it's very visual and it's very easy to use. What they try to do is provide more housing options, promote more continuity in the neighborhoods instead of, having a hodgepodge of things in one neighborhood. Kind of try to get things bundled together so the neighborhood kind of flows. They wanted to make it so it wouldn't be so restrictive that it would drive cost up. So they made sure they allowed for the affordable development options. They have things in there to make it more efficient to use the land. I know they added, like, you can do an accessory building with actually a dwelling unit in it now in a single family. So they added little things like that to help homeowners out, kind of pay the mortgage, kind of, so to speak. Encourages development and consistent with the character of South Bend. So, they do kind of have an overall vision of how they'd like to see South Bend kind of come back together as a nuclear community and kind of flow. So I know they did a lot of things in the new zoning to promote that. And then, like I said, they made it a lot more visual, so it's easier to understand. So
Randy,
here's
I'll speak to that a little bit for a second too. If anybody remembers on this call what the old zoning code used to look like that the city of South Bend had, it was very text heavy, very sort of bureaucratic language. It was very hard for sort of a layperson to get through it successfully. And our new code, I hesitate to say it, it's almost beautiful in the way it's laid out. It's very friendly now. It's very graphically friendly. It's much more clear than it used to be. And I think part of what happened, and maybe Mike Keene, if you want to jump in and say something too, that the old building code had become a little bit sort of suburbanized to the extent that it was actually illegal to build on some lots in the city without a variance. Lots that had once been, common urban lots.
Yeah, but I can add to that quickly, Marty.
Yeah.
Every building code in the country did that because building codes didn't come into place really until after World War II, and most building codes were built after the GI Bill when they were building out in the suburbs. And so the building codes were done by county typically, and typically referred to suburban sorts of sensibilities. So typically it was 8 to 12 variances in most cities across the country to put a house where one used to be. If you were inside the city, if you're out in the suburb, that wasn't a big problem. And the city of South Bend went through a stress test, tried to figure out how we could develop, found out we couldn't. It took me 36 variances to put 7 houses back where 7 houses learned. South Bend figured it out, changed the zoning codes, and really put something that is across the country a model.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So yeah, that was a big improvement, and I would say too, because this is a series for small developers. The new zoning code is much more small developer friendly. You can do things, you have more flexibility on your properties than you had in the past. So it was a good step for South Bend. Really has empowered smaller development in the city in a way that was, like Mike said, you have to get 12 variances just to get something built before. Many of those obstacles have been removed. Those barriers have been removed in the new code. You still have to follow the rules, but it's just more urban friendly, more small developer friendly than it used to be. I'll hand it back to you, Randy. Sorry.
Okay, and then I think you can see by this slide, kind of the concept of building the city from the inside out. You have your downtown, your neighborhood center, your urban flex, all toward the center of the city. And then as you go out, you go urban 2, urban neighborhood 1, and then suburban, and then around the perimeter you want your commercial and industrial to more nuclearize the residential in the city to get it bustling again and bring the people back in. And then of course over here you need your open spaces, and we have a university district also. I'm not sure what these next 2 slides are, probably more technical. I don't know, Marty, do you have any knowledge of, this is in the zoning.
I have not seen these slides before, unfortunately. I'm trying to read what's going on here.
Yeah.
The nice thing about these, the one here, the 65 uses, is that this is a beautiful, these are some very nice charts that are in all of the zoning districts that show you very clearly. I believe dark blue is allowed by right, which means no variance required. That use is allowed on the site. If it's light blue, it's allowed, but with some restrictions, or potentially with a variance required. So some of these things, they're allowed, but you may have to apply for a variance. Like for example, if you own a lot, like a lot of our small developers in South Bend own, it's zone U1, urban neighborhood 1. That's sort of a single family zoning. You are allowed to build a duplex on those properties, but you do have to get a variance to build the duplex.
Marty, that's by special permission. It's not a variance.
Oh, sorry, special permission, but it still has to go to council.
I don't think special permission has to go to council. I could be wrong about that.
I think Angela can rule on that.
Yeah, Angela can rule on special permission. Council and the BZA rules on variances.
Okay, well, you've been through it more than I have, then probably.
Yeah, and all that is an attempt to say that, look, we want to reduce the number of times people have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals to get a variance. They're trying to reduce that. So certain things are just by right, but there's other things that in certain districts are allowed, but they want the zoning folks like Angela to be able to take a look at and say, does that make sense here or not? If and that's special permission. The only thing you have to go to council would be for a variance. That you have to go through the BZA, get a recommendation, take it to council.
Yeah. So I don't know what she was showing in that slide there, but probably just a graphic of a really clear way to look at your property, look at the zoning district it's in, and then what's allowed, what requires special permission, what requires a variance. It's all pretty straightforward and clear in these graphs. So.
Yeah, it's just a table. You connect the dots. You see where you're at and what you want to do. I can see one on here. It says daycare center, and if you're in an urban flex, you're good to go. You can have a daycare center there. So it's just like I said, more visual, more user friendly to try to answer any questions quicker. And then here's the setback thing we were talking about at the beginning of the meeting. The existing one, you had to go through this whole process to figure out what the setback of your lot is. And then Angela and Tim got a hold of it and said, hey, if you got a corner lot, your setback's gonna be 15 feet. It doesn't matter what side of the house you're on. It's gotta be 15 feet either way. So just try to simplify things and not make it any harder than they have to be.
So in this case, this is no longer existing or proposed, right? The proposed is now the existing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Then of course, our website, you can go find your property or properties that you're looking at, and it'll pop up, what it's in, and then you can go to the zoning ordinance and see what you can do there on that property. South Bend,
just as an experiment, Randy, I'm going to take control and bring up the actual map and ask somebody to give me an address of a property that they own.
Okay.
So does somebody want to unmute themselves and give me an address?
1034 Beale.
134 Beale?
1034.
1034 Beale. So this is the zoning map, the South Bend zoning map. It's a GIS map. So we can zoom. Sorry, my screen's not here. So we can zoom to that property and we see, number one, it's color coded. So by that light brown color, we see that it's zoned urban neighborhood 1.
All we see is you. You haven't shared the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do I need to stop sharing?
Randy may need to stop sharing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Randy. You may need to stop and then start again.
Okay, there you go. I see yours now.
You can see mine now. So I typed up here, I went to the South Bend zoning map and I typed in the address 1034 Beale. And then that brings me to, it kind of zooms me into the location of that, which has the dot on it. And then you see here light brown, it's zoned urban neighborhood 1. And from there, we can click on the little more info link and it'll tell you everything about that parcel too. So it'll tell you the parcel ID, parcel address, the zoning code, the zoning description. And then you can go from there, click on more info, and it takes you directly to the code itself, the actual document of the code itself. And from there, you can open up a PDF file that will then explain to you in detail what's allowed on an urban neighborhood 1 zoned property.
Can you go back to the one that had the colors in it?
Yes. Sorry, here we go. Whoop, here we go. So if I'm here, there, can you see that?
Yep.
Rick, do you have a specific question?
No. Well, that's the one I was talking to Randy about earlier. We've already excavated and getting ready to put in footings or.
Okay, that's a property that you're doing some work on.
That's the property that we're going to be putting the first container home in. And the question, it's been resolved, but the issue was they wanted a 15-foot setback. And if you put a 15-foot setback in there, it'll be behind all the other houses. So you have to adjust to the community and to the situation, I gather. And all
Okay.
of those, that's what I was trying to look at.
I wish Angela were here because she really knows the ins and outs of those kinds of questions. So I really regret, for
Yeah,
those
so
of you
what
who joined a
I
little
can
bit
respond to
later.
that question because I've dealt with it.
Sure.
If there is a set of setbacks, there is a setback there, but if there is a series of houses that are not on, let's say you've got a 15-foot setback in the code, but a series of houses on either side are running at 10, then instead of the code, you can ask to be allowed to go to what the standard is on the block. And that again is something that Angela and her folks can let you do.
So that, what did you call that again, Mike? The zoning manager has the.
Well, you've got the setback, but every now and then what you find is along a block, this is the zoning code that applies to everything, but along a block, for some reason, that block might not have had 15 feet behind it. The common U1 would be 15 feet, but sometimes you've got a block where you look at across a block, it's all 10. If all of it across the block is 10, then you can go to the zoning and say, hey, ours are all 10, and they'll say, okay, yeah, you can move it up. So the code is there to provide the standard, but if what is existing is different from the code standard, you can go to the zoning department and say, hey, and again, they don't have to go for a variance for that. They can just look at it and say, yes, you're right, and take care of that, which is probably what you did, Rick.
Yeah, and that's the thing I wanted to compliment Angela and Randy and the city on, and the fact that that could have, in the past, that would have to be contested as a variance.
Yeah,
Now,
all I can say to anybody who's on this, the best thing to do is draw yourself a site plan. You do not pay an architect to do it. That's a waste of money. Draw it by hand on graph paper for yourself to begin with. Put in the design, the elements, and then go to Angela's office. There's 3 people at least in that office who will take a look at it, and they'll tell you what you need to do. I've done that numerous times. And then you only start bringing architects in when you actually are ready to do drawings that you have to take to get permits and stuff like that. But in the beginning, you can learn all you need by going and consulting with them. They are wonderful.
amen. That's really good because it saves money, saves time, and allows you to move up the process a lot faster. That's good.
Does anyone else have an address they want me to plug in that they're curious about? Maybe a property that they own or a property that they're curious about before we switch back to the presentation? If not, Randy, I will stop sharing again and let you take back over. It's actually just fun to look at this map and see how the city is designed too, from a zoning perspective. You know, if you look at the map here, you see pretty quickly where, I zoomed out too far, where there are clusters of commercial activity, where there are clusters of single family homes or higher density residential properties. See, this isn't loading very well, but you know, where you see this purple along this main highway here, that's zone neighborhood center, which is more of a commercial district that allows for higher density residential, but also different commercial uses. It's pretty interesting to look at, and just from, you know, just color coded, you can start to understand things about the city by the way it's zoned.
Marty, does it has the county information also?
So Randy, I don't know if you want to speak to that. The county does its own, this zoning code applies to the city of South Bend.
Okay.
Yeah, you can go to the county GIS and get
Yeah.
all the same information for the, you know, what is zoned in the county and things like that.
Okay.
Barbara, I remember looking up your property there, actually on the other side of Mayflower on the county map. So
Oh, okay.
that can certainly be done. I
Okay.
don't think it's quite as pretty as the South Bend one, but
Yeah.
it still works.
No, it's not.
Little harder to read, but you can still find the information out.
They didn't change the setback in the county, did they?
No.
I don't think so. All right, I'm going to stop sharing, Randy, and hand it back to you.
Are you seeing it?
Yep.
Okay, good. So kind of what this is all what Marty just went over. And then there's several pages of illustrations about how to place your buildings on lots that are on alleys, you know, just different combinations. So once again, visualization was a big key to what they wanted to do. And then commercially, the building standards for commercial buildings are a little bit more restrictive, let's say. So we have a plan review process that involves all the different city departments that zoning is involved in. So like on a commercial project, you would submit everything to us, and then we would run it through the plan review, and Angela would look at your plans for all these things. Now, just like Rick and Mike were saying earlier, you can go to zoning before you submit plans, before you get architects involved, just to see what you can do and what the restrictions are, to tell you whether your project is viable or not before you even have too much time or money invested. And then there's a whole section on definitions to try to help you out. As far as, you know, explicit things, you know, like how much glass you have to have on the street side and things like that. So that's all we have on the zoning. Now we're going to get into the
Randy,
building
could you click back to that last screen you just was at?
This one.
The next one, the other one, go back. One more. No, I guess that wasn't it. You might have went forward. It may be forward.
Oh, the permits?
That right there. Hold that.
Yeah.
1 second.
So this is something we have on our website, the building department, which is also at, you know, the city of South Bend website. Just go to the departments and then hit the building, and you'll come to our building website page. And this is kind of just a little handout we give for, you know, what you need a permit for. And this can actually be translated into commercial too. So anything you see on here is residential or commercial. So if you do a new commercial building or a new home, you need a permit, obviously. Additions, accessory structures over 120 square feet, remodeling worth more than $500, and things like that. So this is kind of a nifty little handout that we put together a couple years ago that we give people, and it's all, like I said, it's also on our website. Now, the electrical, the plumbing, and the HVAC, you can change plumbing fixtures, you can change electrical fixtures, and you can change out like grills and things on your HVAC systems. But if you add, the way I like to put it, if you're adding wire, you need a permit. If you're adding a recept, or if you're adding some kind of fixture and you have to run more wire, or if you have to run more plumbing pipe, or if you have to run more ductwork or put a new heating system in, you definitely need a permit. We need to look at that stuff, make sure it's put in properly and it's safe. So now we're this is our commercial plan review flow chart. And we've really worked on this the last 3 years to try to make it user friendly for everybody. Anybody I've talked to from out of town, any builders, developers, they really like our system. All the information comes to the building department. All the civil plans, all the building plans, are submitted to the building department. We compile them all together into a digital format, and we have all departments that need to review those plans in the system, and we hold our reviews on a weekly basis. You as the developer or the owner or the contractor submit to us the plans with an application. We put them out. If you have them into us by the end of the day Monday, they will be on that week's plan review. So then we compile them on Tuesday. We compile all the plan reviews for that week on Tuesday, and then we send out an agenda to all the different departments, county and city, to review those plans. They have until noon on Friday to give us their plan review notes back. Then sometime after noon on Friday, we email whoever's on the application as the contact the review notes. Now, that's a 1 week cycle. That's a 1 week turnaround. And from what I've heard of contractors and builders from the other areas, that's unheard of. So we've tried to really streamline it and be very communicative and interactive with our builders and developers. We even will take a set of civil drawings on a commercial job and run them through plan review before we get all the rest of the drawings, just to make sure those are okay and there's no major issues going to happen, like extra fire hydrants and extra water lines and things like that. So we've really worked very hard in the last couple of years to get that process down pat. Another thing I wanted to touch on was the building code in the state of Indiana. All the jurisdictions in the state of Indiana are subject to the adoption of the building code that is by the state of Indiana. So all jurisdictions are under the same code. It's not like you go from one town to another and you have to build by another code. Now, inspectors and code officials in other towns may see otherwise, and I've kind of heard things to that effect, but we're all under the same code. Now, as a city, you can enact an ordinance or try to pass an ordinance that's more restricted than the code, but it can't be less restrictive than the code. So in order to do that, you have to submit that ordinance to the state of Indiana, and then the building commission for the state of Indiana has to approve that ordinance, and then you can start enforcing it, which I think some of these communities institute more restrictive ordinances and don't go through the process. So that's the rule of the state of Indiana. We're all subject to the Indiana State Code, which is the IBC, International Building Code, as adopted by the state of Indiana. Right now we're in the 2012 version, so they need to get to adopting the newer version. A new version comes out every 3 years. And the residential, they just adopted the 2018 version of the International Residential Code with Indiana amendments, and adopted that in 2020. So that's a fairly new code. Another thing on commercial sites. So say you have an existing building that was a factory and you want to turn it into a dance hall or a church or something like that. Well, that's a change of use. That's viewed as a change of use. Now I'm talking building, I'm not talking about zoning. So of course you'd have to make sure the zoning was conducive, but the building itself, that's a change of use in the eyes of the state of Indiana. So there's a couple ways you can do that. You can either meet the current code for the new use you have, which that would be going from a factory to an assembly use, and you would meet that current code for the assembly use. Or there's a way to use that building for a different use and not comply with the most current code, and that's called Chapter 34. And what that does, it's mainly used for not having to put a sprinkler system in a building. So those can be very expensive. So a lot of times a developer or a builder will go the Chapter 34 route, which is typically done by an architect, which puts more alarm system, more safety systems. You can compartmentalize the buildings. You can put up firewalls and things like that to avoid sprinkling them. And then you submit that to the state, and the state says, yeah, you're good to go. And so that's the most common way these older buildings are used for repurposing. So if you ever find a piece of real estate and you're thinking about doing that, then make sure you explore the Chapter 34 possibilities with it and save yourself some money. Also, you know, the difference between the residential code and the commercial code, basically, once you get to more than 3 dwelling units or 3 dwelling units or more, you have to sprinkle. So duplexes and single family are all done out of the residential code, and then anything 3 family and more, 3 dwelling units and more, come out of the commercial, and that's when you run into having to use a sprinkler and things like that.
Randy, could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Randy, if you're doing a set of townhouses with firewalls between them, and not, you know, say 6 townhouses with firewalls between them side by side, as opposed to 4 units in a fourplex, do you still need the sprinkler?
So townhouses, between each townhouse, there's a 2-hour fire separation. You do not need to sprinkle. So that's also built out of the residential code. So really that's like the only multifamily development that's more than 2 that you can avoid sprinkling, but you have to meet the requirement of the 2-hour separation between each unit, all the way up to the roof deck. So the decking on the roof actually has to be fire treated plywood, where that wall hits the underside of the roof. So that townhouses are the exception to that rule.
So, Randy, before you go on, I want to get to a couple of questions that are in the chat window. They're a little off topic from where you were going, but maybe we can hit them really quickly here. And Jim, feel free to chime in. Jose was asking about tiny homes, and I guess Jose, was that a zoning question or a building code question, or maybe a little bit of both in this case?
Hi, just I want to know if I can find in the zoning description if I can build a tiny house. It's an empty lot that I have. I have a couple of empty lots in the city of South Bend, and I saw the thing of Mike was developing some tiny houses in the Portage area. But I want to know if I can build a tiny house. For example, I have an empty lot very close to the Logan Street and Jefferson Street, and it's S1 zoning code, but I don't know if I can build it. I have another lot in the Lincoln Way area, and I think that could be housing solution for the community, building tiny houses over there. But the zoning is S2, but I'm not sure if I can build it. My question is where I can find in the description, if I can find in the description of this zoning, if I can build tiny houses.
Okay. I would say, Mike, Jim, Randy, do you want to jump in on that? Maybe Jose, it depends on what exactly you mean by tiny home to some degree. I saw in the chat window, there's a description between whether it's on a trailer, so it's a movable thing, or whether it's on a permanent foundation. And do you have an idea of like what square footage you're talking about for the home?
Yeah, but basically it's a permanent foundation, because I was reading that if you don't have a permanent foundation, it's a mobile home. And basically, if you want to sell the house, the people that want to apply for a loan have to be a permanent foundation to get a loan for that. And it's the reason because they're expecting is build tiny houses with a permanent foundation. Could be a crawl space, and a small living space, and a detached garage.
So, yeah, I mean, as far as the building code's concerned, yeah, there's a section in the code about tiny houses, and it needs to be on a permanent foundation. But yeah, you would have just give Angela a call about where your lots are. I don't know if there's certain areas that they don't allow tiny houses or not, but I would definitely start with Angela and see if those are acceptable in those locations. But as far as the building department is concerned, as long as it has a permanent foundation, there is a section in the building code that governs over tiny houses, and I'm not current on that. I would have to go to it and talk to you about it more. But there is a minimum square footage and things like that you'd have to meet, but there's definitely accommodation in the building code for it.
Yeah, and that's why the definition of tiny home maybe matters here. And Mike, I don't know, maybe you want to speak to this too, because where's the line between a tiny home and just a very small house, right?
Isn't the minimum, Jim, I defer to Jim, but Jim, isn't the minimum space for a residence in South Bend 150 square feet?
I was trying to actually look that up and see, because I think they did establish a floor, but again, it's pretty low. It's pretty.
It had been 150. They might have upped it. The concept tiny house is not typically a concept that's separate in most zoning codes. It's something that's kind of an industry thing that says if it's between 250 and 450, it's a tiny house. If it's between 450 and 800, it's a cottage. If it's 800 a pluff, it's a standard house. But South Bend for a long time had a very low minimum square footage for a main residence. And I don't know what that is in the new code. It was pretty small in the old one.
Yeah. Maybe you can look it up, Jim. Maybe it's pretty interesting. You drive around South Bend, you see a lot of very small homes that were built long ago. Probably smaller than the tiny homes that Mike built.
Yeah, we just did 16 by 24.
Footage.
It would have been 360 square feet if it would have been only one story. So you can get pretty small in South Bend. We don't have that requirement that some cities do.
Yeah.
I do think if you build an auxiliary dwelling unit behind a house, it has to be smaller than the front house. So if you're thinking, gee, I want to build a tiny house behind my house, don't build 400 feet up front. If you want 600 behind it, do it the other way around. Put 600 up front, because the auxiliary dwelling unit has to be tinier than the one on front.
Yep. And I was just looking to see, I did find some information here in what I believe is the state code. This is the 2018 IRC. And Randy, that's correct. You guys are still in 2018 IRC in Indiana, yes?
Yes, sir. Yeah, with the Indiana amendments.
Correct. Yes, and I believe this is it here, Indiana amendments. I do not see within this code here that I'm looking at, again, to double check that we're doing it correctly. It does say a dwelling that is 400 square feet or less, excluding lofts. That's what the idea of a tiny house is in the building codes. So take a look at that. I'll double check back here and see if there's anything else in the zoning code. It's not a separate type in the code. You may have mentioned earlier how we have types of structures, housing types in particular, and so it is not its own special type. It could be considered an ancillary dwelling, as Mike mentioned, if it is in the rear of the principal structure. So how big it is, if it is 400 square feet or around thereabouts, it's just considered another unit on the property. And so for the most part, there's not going to be any, there is an ability to build ancillary structures in both the S1 and S2 zones. As an example, I heard you mention, as well as all the U zones. The S1 and U1 zones do allow for ADUs in the rear, but those are you have to get a special permit, apply for a special permit to have those in those S1 and U1 zones. In the S2 and then U2 and up, more intense, those are allowed by right. So
hey Jim, what's an ADU?
Accessory dwelling unit, that would be a secondary structure, and as Mike mentioned, a structure that has fewer square feet than the principal structure in the front of the lot. And in many cases, you can have ancillary structures that are non-residential, like a garage, or if you have an accessory dwelling unit, ADU, that could be by itself on its own foundation, or it could be above a garage. And so there are some particular physical requirements that they have. It is a specific typology of residential building that's listed in, it is in section, oh shoot, where is it here? Special districts, overlay uses, standard districts, building standards, there it is. Section 8 of the zoning code, it has an area for building standards. And so within that chapter, you can see what the requirements are. It's also referred to as a carriage house if you put the unit above the garage. If you're looking for the unit above the garage scenario, it is considered a carriage house. And you can see where it can go on the property, and some of the other specific things that it needs to do. So that's if you were going after that in the rear of a property, and you can look at that. If you're just going to put one tiny house that's 400 square feet on a foundation on a lot, you just follow the regular detached house requirements. And those again are quite flexible. There's not an overwhelming amount of regulation onto that. So does that help spell these things out? There are a couple lines in the sand between the zoning code and the building code, but where you put that smaller structure is probably the biggest thing that is important to note when you're looking for what governs it in the zoning code, where it goes, and what it's in relationship to and what zone you're in.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, Randy.
Jose, feel free to, yeah, okay, but thank you in the window. So it sounds like the answer is basically, depending on a little bit of how you define what you mean by tiny home, the answer is yes. And depending a little bit on what the zoning district is, it sounds like you could build a 500 square foot house and then a 400 square foot house behind it. And that would be legal on many of our zoning districts.
Pretty much all of them. The only question is if you're going to build this building behind another one, the S1 and U1s will require you to go through one more hoop of permission, and which has to go to a commission hearing. Otherwise, if you're in the other more intense residential zones, it's just allowed by right.
Okay. Randy, this is Barbara. I have a question about manufactured homes, the ones that they build within a building and just put the walls together on the lot. Is there any special requirements different from just regular stick-built homes?
So you're like panelized, they come out in panels and they tilt the panels up?
Yeah,
No,
and just put the panels together.
No, that would come under the same as the residential code.
Okay,
And then a regular typical manufactured home is inspected by the state,
okay,
and it has these inspection tags on it. And as long as we have those inspection tags, we're good. But anything that's done on site, we still have to inspect, even on the manufactured homes.
okay,
So for instance, if you run plumbing, in a crawl space that didn't come attached to the manufactured home, we have to inspect that plumbing
okay,
before we'll give a certificate of occupancy on it.
okay.
So I'll just finish out this last slide I got up here. This is the commercial plan review. So if you get a project that's so big that it has to go to state, you can submit your plans to the state simultaneously with us, and we'll review them together. And typically by the time they get back from the state, we're already done with our review, and then you would be ready to go. The state gives themselves 20 working days to turn around a plan review. And like I said, ours is a week, and even if it's got to go through 2 or 3 times, we still get it resolved before the state releases the project for us to issue a permit. We can't issue any permits on commercial projects until the state releases, if there's a state release required. And then to convolute that a little bit more, there's a general administrative rule section in the state code that kind of qualifies what we can inspect locally without a state release, and what we can inspect, what needs to go to the state. And I have that information here. So if you ever run into a project you want to know if you need a state release for, get a hold of me, and we'll kind of run through the checklist and direct you in the right direction. So I think that's all for the slide presentation.
Go back so I can look at that, the last closing section. I've been taking a picture of each section, that's why.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just 1 second. Thank you. And what's the other one? Thank you. Now, Jim, you've been on several calls. What's Jim? Are you in another state, or where are you?
Yes, I'm in Minneapolis. Yeah, so I've been working with the city now for a couple of years, supporting both the city as well as small developers. And so I was involved in a number of the rounds of zoning code revision work that happened a few years ago. I'm not the zoning consultant. There was a consultant that was hired to work underneath Angela and Tim and Mike, but I was working with them alongside those projects and assisted with some of that work as it happened. So done a lot of the applied learning as we were actually trying to use the code now.
I met you during when I think it was when Jennifer was online.
Oh yes, yep. I was
that's when I met you the
couple
first time.
Months ago. Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I talked with her today about tonight. One of the things, and I hope it's okay, Marty, to have a little discussion for a moment. One of the things that I think it's so important that night when we were doing the plan, looking at all the multiple houses and the pre-approved drawings and whatnot, the opportunity to look at those things, and also to look at any of the modular manufacturing companies around the state of Indiana who have designed houses or homes that fit into the urban 30 foot by 128 or whatever those are, be it duplex, multi-unit, double lots kind of thing, which were on that sheet. I really hope that particular package gets passed. And I learned that several of the council people have not even seen it yet. And I don't know if that's true or not, Marty.
It's still working its way through the city. Yeah.
It probably is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
would
why
like to
it's
see
not
that
been
move a
released
little
yet.
faster as well, Rick, but we're working on it.
The home
I
plans,
understand.
are you talking about the pre-approved home plans?
Yes.
I think they're
That's
seeing them tonight.
Oh, is that
I think
right?
they're doing a presentation today.
awesome. See that? Speak things up and it happens.
That's great.
Yeah, I actually was on a presentation with Liz on Friday. She said that it was getting very close, but I
Yeah.
didn't have any specific details. So Randy, you'd be in the loop since it's got to come by your desk too.
For those of you who don't know what we're, sorry, Randy, go ahead.
No, I'm good.
I'm good. Go right ahead.
I was just gonna say, for those of you who are on the call that don't know what we're talking about here, a few months ago, we had an architect on the call who talked us through, and Jim helped talk us through some pre-approved building plans that the city is developing. I think maybe almost everyone on this call was on that call as well. But the idea then being, again, being to create some products that could go into the hands of small developers in the city to streamline the process even further. So, get the zoning code cleaned up, get these pre-approved plans cleaned up. So take away a lot of those obstacles that you might face as a small developer, is sort of the intention. So those will hopefully be ready for release here soon, especially if, like Randy said, they're being presented to council now. So hopefully we'll be able to release those and share those with folks who are interested in maybe doing a development like that.
I have a question. It's
Yep.
and some because I kind of listened to the last session, but I was in South Carolina at the time. But I had heard that there was an effort on the part of the housing authority to do a multi-use type of development over near the housing authority area. Has that or a comprehensive affordable housing plan for the city? Has any activity gone around that at all? Is there any conversation about that?
I don't know what you've heard, Randy. I know that Dr. Lamberg, who's the new director of the Housing Authority here in South Bend, has a vision for what she would like to see happen. I assume when you say the Housing Authority area, you're talking about sort of the intersection of Western and Chapin.
Yes.
Where there is some Housing Authority property that, they have property all around the city, but yeah, she does have a large vision for what she would like to see happen in that area. I'm not sure that it's set yet.
I have not heard nor seen anything.
I was just wondering, and is the city looking, in light of what we've been doing over this past year, as in addition to looking at the pre-approved housing and the new zoning and things that we're talking about tonight, Randy and Marty, what as we look at affordable housing vision, is there anything moving in that area?
Hey, Rick,
Yeah.
that's really a conversation for another group.
Okay, I didn't know if it started here. Thanks a
No,
lot.
I mean, this
That's
is
okay.
what we're trying to do is help the small scale developers build that ecosystem. If you want to go offline with me and talk about that, I can put you in
Oh,
contact.
no, that's
with
good. I
people,
didn't know if
to
it was
answer that,
appropriate.
but that's really beyond both the folks who are here and also the folks who want to hear here. It's related to what we're doing, but it really is another piece of the puzzle. So
Thank you.
contact me and I'll
Yeah.
help you contact with some
That's
folks.
very
about
helpful.
that
Thank
piece.
you. Thank you very
Now,
much.
Rick, you did have a more specific building code question, I think, in the chat window a little bit ago
Yes.
about
I can-
basements.
I
Why don't
can-
we
I can
tackle that question?
I can articulate that. I've worked in Michigan with Superior Walls, which is precast concrete basements and crawl space. And I know the owners out east, and I know the owner here up in Hamilton, Michigan. And I was wondering, had there been any experience in using that? Because their drainage system is a little bit different than a standard footings. And maybe Jim or Randy could speak to that if either have some insight.
Randy, I'll let you go first if you've already seen it happen in town. I was curious to that same thing myself, Randy, because we had some builders that have come down to South Bend, and I wanted to know if anyone built one in South Bend yet.
So are we talking about the walls that are set on
rock.
Yeah, they're
Rock,
on
yeah.
special rock,
Yeah.
special rock, and they're precast, and then they're mounted together, air, watertight, et cetera, and lowered in.
Yeah, we've seen those in the past. That's acceptable. We may need manufacturer specs on the load requirement, that they meet the load requirements, but just a manufacturer spec or whatever.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, there's a section in the code for alternative means of construction, and
mhm.
we're very open to that
Yeah.
residential.
The only limitation I'm aware of with the standard size superior wall panels is that essentially you're peaked at 2.5 stories. You might be able to do 3 stories, but that's a little bit just depends on how big the structure is. So just for everyone else who's maybe not aware of the system, you can go Google it. It's very, very good. There's a number of there's a consortium of home builders I'm working with in Kalamazoo that is doing sort of modest sized single family houses in conjunction with the city, and that's all they use now is the superior walls.
Yeah, you can actually build homes with it as well as basements and foundations. And the tag along with that same question, I live in Cassopolis, and we build a 6,000 square foot ICF insulated concrete home and 10-inch thick walls with casting. Has there any of that been going on in Minnesota, in Indiana? Anybody have expressed? They're also good for basements and foundations as well. Randy, has there been any activity with usage of that product?
I've been here 14 years and I've seen one ICF. I actually did one myself when I was a builder, so they're definitely acceptable, and I like them, but I don't know if it's I don't know why people don't use them.
I'm very
maybe
satisfied with it.
Yeah, it might be the upfront cost. I don't know. You can reuse forms, but I mean, you get your forms and your insulation and everything all in one package. So just didn't take off around here.
Just one thing to keep in mind about superior walls, you can only get those implied if they put them in. In other words,
oh yes,
there
people have to
contract them. And then just let me make one general comment about a basement. A basement is $25,000 to $35,000. If we're talking about affordable housing, what we really have to ask is, does that basement add that much value to the house in terms of what we're doing?
Right. Well, we're talking mainly cost-based more than anything. It was just seeing if there was a faster way to do it. That's all. I was looking at speed and quality.
Yeah. The other upside to the superior homes is that you can bend your way into the seasons a little bit better. You can get started a lot later than you'd otherwise want to get started if you are going to put a basement in, if that's actually what you're trying to do. Because you're not pouring, you don't have those issues of having to let concrete cure, in 30-degree weather or something like that. So it has extended the building season for the guys who do it all the time up in Michigan that I've been working with. They'll even go as far to heat the ground in some cases if they're really anxious and decked up and break it up. So as long as you dig the hole, if the hole's dug while it's still warm, they'll put that concrete cast in place, in there pretty much. It's 0 degrees out. They don't really care. It's just rock and panels at that point. So one other upside to if you get into a situation where you're running up against the clock at the end of a calendar year and heading into winter, that's an option as well. So it's the one other thing that the home builders who do use it like about it. So do we have, I want to make sure as we get closer to the end of our time here, are there other questions that were not in the chat window that others wanted to put forward? I think we've answered everything in the chat window that I've seen.
I want to commend the city on that zoning package. I really like what you're doing. This seems to be very user friendly, and that's very good.
I take this code around the country now and tell people you should just try to get it close as you can. just try to make it this good, and you'll probably land at a good spot. So it is it's definitely very it's easy to interact with. And I think that was the one of the things that came out of, I'll channel my inner Tim Corcoran for a minute here, the planning director. Those of you, many of you here know him, but that was the number one thing when I was just doing a presentation with him on Friday to a bunch of planners actually in the state of Michigan, and he was basically saying like the number one thing that we learned when we did the exercise that I was a part of a couple years ago was that it was very difficult. We had the entire planning staff, this was before the city and the planning staff had reemerged again. And so we pretty much everybody who would ever touch the building code, be either on a day-to-day basis or a long-range basis, in one room. And we, of all those brains, had differing opinions over what language in the previous code meant, stood for, or could be interpreted as. And I was like, well, if this is an entire brain trust is in this room and we can't make heads or tails out of a provision, this is not a good sign, right? And so I think that was the number one sort of issue that came out of sort of the interface, the usability. And the second one was because we're just trying to describe physical elements, having these images that are now in this code really help to make sure that you're not having sort of compound misunderstandings about this number applies to this item in this way, in this physical manifestation. And so I think it is for the folks that I've now worked with over the last year, it's almost 2 years now. Actually, we're coming up on 3 years, I guess, in January. It's pretty crazy. It went into effect in January 2019, I believe now. It is starting to, we're starting to be able to see different types of buildings that have been built now underneath the new code and really see how it plays out. So I think it is a quite serious upgrade from when I first came to town and trying to help other people here identify the rules. So
the South Bend Code was a regular reference as a model at the most recent meetings of the Congress for New Urbanism a couple of weeks ago.
Awesome. I have a question, Marty or Jim. South Bend has a OZ, an opportunity zone. Is there any room for incremental developers to be a part of that? And if so, how?
Well, one of the challenges with the opportunity zones in South Bend is that they're really located on the fringes of the city. And so the answer is always yes, because there's always opportunity for incremental and small things, no matter what you're doing. It's just a matter of what it is. But I think based on my memories, the map, and I know Mike, you had one point had printed out that map. I remember sitting in your living room talking about this a few years ago when OZs were the hot topic of the conversation. So I think in part the location of where eligible properties are at is less overlapping with a majority of the smaller lot infill or rehab work that we often talk about in this group and with this in this educational series. So I think it has a lot more to do with geography than anything else. In other cities, in Minneapolis, we don't have a ton of them here, but they're kind of targeted in these sort of core areas that look a lot more like near Northwest or Sherman Harrison or far Northwest or Rum Village. It looks like those neighborhoods more physically here in Minneapolis. So Marty, I'll defer if you have any other comments on that front, but that's my sort of hot take on opportunity zones. Had they maybe been put in a different location, we probably would have been talking more about them in this group, but I have not run into a lot of people working at the edge of the city, at least not those edges of the city.
Thank you.
Hey, Jim, I'll be a little bit less polite than you. Take a look at those opportunity zones and take a look at the red line zones in which you couldn't loan in, and they look very similar. There's very few operating zones that have any overlap with the red line zones. They were largely chosen so that the investors would be able to make money. And so they're in the areas that are already fairly affluent. So I think the short-term answer is, first of all, it's largely for bigger investors than what we typically find with our small-scale developers. And second of all, it does not overlap with our neighborhoods.
I'm not going to say much more than not to throw anybody at the city under the bus. It is a program that really probably deserves to be looked at very hard, and there are modifications that ought to be made, because as it exists right now, it's
Well, yeah, and that's the reason I brought it up is because, and I saw where it's located in South Bend. And then I was wondering, I said, wait a moment, who put this together? Who laid out this? And it fits exactly what
To a
Mike
certain
just
extent,
said.
Rick, it was some input from the city, but it was largely laid out for us by the state. And then the only other thing I would say is even if they were laid out right, opportunity zones are a way to take wealth and the wealth created by labor locally and suck it into investors out of the community, is to bring investment in. But if somebody invests $100 in South Bend, they want $115 back. And that's not staying here. So I would argue that, let's not worry too much about where the opportunity zones are not, because we're trying to create wealth in neighborhoods for neighborhoods, not trying to create wealth in the neighborhood that somebody in California gets a big deal for because they can invest 100,000 or more.
Mm-hmm. And well, the other reason was, why can't we talk about incremental opportunity zones that have similar incentives? I know I'm very serious.
Yeah,
about
I actually
that
got something
because-
for you on that in a small way. That's actually going to be so. I heard from Tim Corcoran on Friday that we're very close to having a official machinery to be able to help assist with some of the sewer and water lateral infrastructure costs. So I don't have all the details. I haven't seen the whole proposal. Marty may know a little bit more about it, but the funding mechanism was the trickiest part, and they seem to have kind of found a good way to do that within some sewer charges and things like that, and how that will be spent with the city. So more to come on that, but I
That's
know
a
Mike,
hallelujah. That's a hallelujah conversation right there.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
all
that's right along with the pre-approved plans in a way, we know it's an obstacle, right? It's an obstacle to developing vacant lots in the city right now.
Well, it
and-
actually cancels out all the other great work, because if you've got to pay $18,000 to $20,000 to connect on something that the city should be offering, it just takes affordability out of it, just to connect to the street. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
it's been a problem for a
Steve,
long time. People buy an empty lot and they say, oh, I've got this empty lot. I want to develop a house on it. They don't realize that they're already $20,000 in the hole on their project before they've even put a shovel in the ground, because they don't have a functioning water sewer connection.
I'm going to just say amen, Ella.
Yeah.
I do want to mention, because have we talked about the Build South Bend website again here recently?
No, but that's
Marty?
a good time to pitch that. So
Okay,
go for it.
good. If you want to pull it up, go ahead, and I can color
I
comment.
sure will.
What is it
know
called
in this,
again?
I'll
Marty,
bring it
I'll
up.
pull it up here for you so you can take a look. And a couple of you on this call are actually featured in this website, so we have some royalty in the house here tonight. But we part of the work that I have assisted the city with and Marty's department with is to put together a lot of these resources. We don't have this anywhere else in the educational series we've got queued up here over the next several months. I just thought I'd slip it in tonight because this is as close as we really would get thematically to talking about this. But part of the things that are on the website, and I was trying to figure out where it's at. So maybe
Can you see my screen right now?
Yes, we
Yeah.
can now see it. And I was trying to remember where it's at. Is it under the procure permits permit?
No,
A
you
lot
can
of
just
the
go to
information.
southbendian.gov/BSB.
Yeah.
What did you just say?
He's
Okay,
got it
that's
on the
the
screen
site.
there.
All right.
Yeah, BSB. So a number of the things that the resources that Randy talked about tonight in terms of the permitting processes and so forth. If you want to go into the building permit one there, Marty, you can go down a little bit further.
Yeah.
Procure permits. Yes, a lot of the really great resources that were shown tonight are right there on that webpage. And so if you go into that, you'll get right to the building permit section of the city website. As you scroll down that page, you'll see a lot of information of these different the flow charts and some of the other pieces of the puzzle. Also, I believe on that webpage here, as it's going to scroll all the way down, there is some links to the Public Works website. So if you want to know, for instance, hey, can I get information from the city about how deep is the sewer line in front of the lot that I own, right? That information is also available. I actually was just working with the city through one of our nonprofit partners owners and got some information that was very helpful. And so I know that that information is out there so that you can get a better sense for some of those costs and things that's kind of hard to see, just out in, on a physical site. So there's some sort of X-ray vision. So I want to just reference that, not say too much more about this, but to reference some of the information that is in there that relates to both permits as well as information the city has in order for a developer or a builder to be able to find that information about their site specifically.
Yep. Thank you, Jim. That's great.
What else should we talk about with this permit, with this website here? I think I hope most of you have been up here before, but we always want to pitch.
Well, so glossary of terms, there's sourcing some idea. Source of property section talks about tax sales, sheriff sales, all sorts of things, short sales, a lot of connections to different ways you might get your hands on a piece of property. There are sample pro formas. So once you do have a property, there's a link here to some Excel spreadsheets that help you figure out, will my property cash flow? There is a link to under financing to different financial resources, some things about due diligence when you are looking to buy a lot. It's a lot of things we've talked about on the series. What is new construction cost? What do you have to worry about zoning? What do I have to worry about in a tax sale? Titles, environmental conditions, costs. Finding financing, all these things that are going to impact any small developer almost immediately when you start working in a project.
Marty, can you go back and show that banner with that website again?
The top of it? Yeah, here, hold on. Let me go back here. So it's right there.
Yeah, that's it.
southbendin.gov/BSB for Build South Bend. I believe it's right here on the main page under I'm looking for, let me see, it used to be here anyway. There it is right there too. So it's on the main city webpage under I'm looking for, you see Build South Bend right there, the third one down. We put this together as a resource. The other big thing that's coming up that I want everyone to know about is, in addition to some additional Wednesday night series like we're doing tonight, we are planning another networking session, sort of a happy hour networking style session like we did back in September. I know a lot of you were there. We're going to do another one, and you can pencil this in your calendars, on June 23rd.
Where?
At Howard Park again. I really want to do it on the west side, but Howard Park was just such a beautiful venue for us last time.
Yeah, Howard is nice.
That I decided we'll go ahead and do it there again for this event. But it's going to be a really nice event. We've got Northwest Bank is chipping in to buy some food for us, so we'll have appetizers. Of course, if you want to get something to drink, the public house is right there, and we're going to have a bunch of probably dozens of small developers just meeting, greeting. Monty's going to be in town, and Jim is going to be in town in person, both of them, Monty Anderson and Jim Kuhlman, who's on this call.
Oh, Bernice Radel.
And Bernice is going to be there. Yes.
And let me just add just one thing before we get to a closer. I want to call out Cynthia Williams and Christopher Harris. They're on with us. They're actually from Gary. And they've been learning about what we're doing here. And they're going to be coming next Friday on a trip to visit what we're doing here and see what's going on. And this afternoon, I spent the afternoon with Ron Clever and David and Jim or Joe out of Rockford, Illinois, looking to do a 15-acre public housing project. And they're also sort of paying attention to what we're doing. So we have got people coming around looking at what we're doing because we have created an ecosystem, and you are all part of it, that folks want to learn about. And so that's part of the whole small scale development ethic, right? We pay it forward, we pass it on.
That's great. Mike, do you want to talk about the Town Makers sessions that you're hosting along with a few other people?
Compliment to what Marty and the city have done. The first Wednesday of every month from 5:30 to 6:45 and the classroom C of the public library, we have what's called our 12-step meeting. And basically, we go through the 12 steps of small scale development, one step each month. And what we talk about is what we are all experiencing. And, you know, whether we're experienced or just starting, we share information with each other. So you're always learning something. And we're on step 2 for this next meeting, first Wednesday of May. We'll be talking about knowing your farm, which is how you get to know all the people, institutions, movers and shakers in your farm. So those are going to be people you're going to work with, because remember, from a small scale development perspective, the project is not your house. It's not your commercial building. It's your neighborhood, and the buildings are just part of it.
Amen. That's good. Marty and Mike, to supplement that, as you know, when in the fall, we held a series of town meetings. A couple of them I helped facilitate, but I didn't host them. And I just see through Marty's first Wednesday, through possibly Team Bender, and definitely through this series, the opportunity to bring those people that we brought together, you know, 466 Works and several South Bend Heritage, to further that dialogue without the political implications on it. I really would love to see that, and they may be at this session with Mike, but my heart was really passionate about continuing with that, and then start talking about ways in which what we don't have is something that modular manufacturers and have, is that we can't buy with economies of scale to buy material and goods and services, not goods and services, but raw material, HVAC equipment, and things that we could purchase to create a collaborative where we can buy product that can help reduce some of the costs in our construction, and to work ways in which to leverage those resources in an incremental opportunity zone. And if you're part of the incremental opportunity zone, you can buy from this wholesale place to be competitive in certain ways. So whoever comes up with that one, I think is going to be a great asset to our vision. Looking forward to something happening.
That's great. That's great, Rick. Yeah, we need to continue these conversations. It's really important. That's why I think what Mike and his partners are arranging, just to provide a format and a venue for continuing these conversations, for teaching each other, and for just getting the ideas flowing, Rick, and getting the right people in the room, and being creative about how we move forward, because we all can look out the window and see that the old models are not working very well. They're not providing the housing that we need, and we're going to have to think beyond sort of the models that have been in place for the last decade or so, and in some ways looking forward, and in other ways we're looking back to models that were in place years ago and that are potentially more effective than anything else today in 2022. So
excellent. Good session tonight.
Yeah. So I will be sending everybody an official invite to the networking event on June 23rd. So you can look for that to show up in your inboxes at some point. I hope that you all can make it, as it should be a fun night. Hopefully it will be a nice, because it's outdoors. So hopefully we'll have good weather that night. Any last questions for Randy? We are at 7:55, so it's time to wrap up. I don't actually have, so the next couple of sessions, I will also be sending an email laying out what the next couple of Wednesday evening sessions will look like, these third Wednesday sessions. According to the original schedule, we were going to do rehabbing. We were going to talk about rehabbing basics was one of them. We were going to talk about site work and landscaping. And we were going to have a session on finding and managing investors and working with contractors. So we're going to get some experts in the room to make those meetings happen. All valuable things for any small developer who's trying to get a project up and off the ground.
Oh, Marty, my last comment is, if you know anybody that's investing or have to apply for the opportunity zones, I've been on several of those investment calls from across the country. It is my contention that if anybody does an opportunity zone in an urban community, they should also say that there must be a percentage of those dollars. Like in a building, you have to have a percentage for affordable income. there should be a percentage of those dollars to be set aside for the small incremental developers. And then I'm gonna shut up on that one, and just throw that hand grenade and run. Let them still pay. Yeah, what the heck?
Yeah. All right, everyone, have a great night and look for an email from me with an invitation to the networking event, and please come, because we've been staring at each other virtually here in these Wednesday evening calls. It'd be really nice to shake hands again.
I'm sorry, there is one final question. All
Oh.
of the PowerPoints, including the one that Pat did, Matthews, can we get access to the PowerPoints, including tonight's?
Yes. Did we ever get Patrick Matthews' PowerPoint? That might have been on me, Rick.
Can't remember. For sure, you can get all the videos. Marty's been posting the videos. So
I got the videos, but to have the PowerPoints, because sometimes
Yeah.
you can't see them because people's faces got over certain elements of them.
Sure.
But it should not be.
Hey, Randy, are you still on the call?
Yeah, I can send that to you, Marty. And
Okay.
I just want to say you guys are doing great work. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Randy.
This is an awesome format right here.
Yeah. Thank you for being here, Randy. And
Thank you,
for
Randy.
You made a big
pinch hitting
difference.
for
Welcome.
Angela. We may have to get Angela back on another call. But
Yes.
I know I can speak for zoning too. We're your resource. Reach out to us anytime you have a question on properties and things like that, code questions, processes that you're not sure of.
Yeah.
We've got groups of professionals that'll help you out.
Well, that one
Wonderful.
biggest piece that I think was Jim that said, if the city goes with that plan to have a minimal cost for tapping, and I don't care if they use ARP monies, because those are barriers. That would be a major move. And
We've
the
been
city-
working on that for a long time.
Yeah, but I mean, those ARP monies qualify, and I would reevaluate that. And that's all I gotta say. Good night.
all right. Good night, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.